MAGA right now is in an all-out panic. They are terrified that their budget will not pass, and they are also terrified of what happens if their budget does pass. MAGA's got two options: shut down the government and be blamed for their incompetence, or pass their budget for the billionaires and by the billionaires and face the consequences of their furious constituents. It is all bad, and they are freaking out. And now is the time for Democrats to pounce. And when it's time for Democrats to pounce on a message, you know who is first in line. It is Jasmine Crockett, who called out Trump, who called out Mike Johnson, who called out all of MAGA to their face in a brutal takedown that we're going to get into. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way, and it really does mean a lot to me. Now let's listen to our favorite, Jasmine Crockett.
Listen, he can't blame me for not wanting to be his doormat, or for the Democrats not wanting to be their doormat. I mean, all we consistently hear from them is they have this mandate that the American people gave them. Well, I am saying that I have a mandate from my district, and it does not involve cutting Medicaid, cutting Medicare. And if we're going to just focus on this continuing resolution, let's talk about it, because I know you just talked to my other colleague from Texas, and he was boasting about the increase in pay for certain service members while not talking about the fact that those that have already served our country, our veterans, that they're going to lose so much of their care. We know that right now they're looking to cut close to 80,000 people from the Veterans Affairs. And then in addition to that, in this CR, all the money for bills that we've passed before, specifically that extra money that we put in for the toxic burn pits, they want to take that out. So it should not be a either or when it comes to those that have served our country or those that are willing to serve our country. And right now they're pitting them against one another. We see as they've decided they're not going to do any more town halls. So I don't know if Tony even knows what his constituents want, that they are consistently getting railed against because of the way that they're treating veterans by making sure that these firings, they're not standing up for the people, they're not standing up for the House. So no, I'm not going to vote for the continuing resolution. The Republicans control the House, the Senate, and the White House. If they want to get their draconian stuff passed that's going to hurt my constituents, they're going to do it by themselves.
And what's very worrisome is that so many veterans who work in federal government agencies are now being fired for various reasons as a result.
Approximately 1/3 of our workforce for the federal government, they're veterans.
Veterans, and we want to make sure those veterans are protected by all means. I want to play a little clip of what we heard from the House Speaker and get your reaction. So listen to this.
They're planning to vote down this simple bill. They are going to try to shut the government down. Every House Democrat will participate in this, it looks like. That would be a shame if it's true. I hope some of them will have a moment of clarity themselves and do the right thing, but it looks like they're going to try to shut down the government. It's a striking new posture for Democrats who have always said they've just been apoplectic about the prospect of government shutdowns.
You want to react?
Yeah, I'm going to say that we don't want the government to shut down. And frankly, this president has single-handedly not just been shutting the government down, but literally trying to dismantle it. And I haven't heard a word out of them. In addition to that, we know that we have been talking about impoundment, which is basically saying, hey, the power of the purse belongs to Congress. Well, guess what? Our speaker doesn't act that way. He doesn't get out there and say, hey, Mr. President, you can't do this. Once we've appropriated dollars, then these dollars are supposed to be for this. And one of the things that they're not talking about in this continuing resolution is the fact that they are going to give even more latitude. This is basically going to be a slush fund for Elon and Donald Trump. They are getting rid of the parameters around the spending. I think the comparison was that we have maybe 88 total pages of kind of whatever the parameters are for how the monies are to be spent, but the majority of the discretion goes to Trump and Elon, when we normally had, I think in our last one, typically we have about 2,800 pages.
We know there are a handful potentially of Republican House members who are going to vote against the continuing resolution, and that could torpedo it. But do you see a bunch of your fellow Democrats voting for it to keep the government open?
Not that I've heard. And you know what? It's interesting that the speaker knows how to call out my colleagues, but this is their bill. So why not call out your own colleagues, the ones that elected you to be their speaker? Listen, Nancy Pelosi didn't have these problems. So if they need some help, maybe you should tune into a woman, because maybe it just takes a woman to get it done.
Like you, is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying.
And you're going to vote against the continuing?
I'm going to vote against it. Now, if they want to decide that they're going to start negotiating negotiating in good faith. Remember our last continuing resolution? Remember it was sunk because Elon decided to go on Twitter. And at this point in time, he had never graced the Oval Office. And so if this is how they want to govern, then you're going to have to get your own house in order. But you can't come to us and just say, here, take it. And we're supposed to say, yes, thank you so much for making us take it. That is not why we were elected. And we want the American people to see that these people cannot function. Well, you've been talking about a stopgap. Everybody's talking about a stopgap.
The continuing resolution.
The continuing resolution. But it's not a stopgap, right? Because for everyone at home, just know that our bills, when we do appropriations, they are for 1 year, right? And they go from September to September. This isn't a stopgap. They've not been able to pass their own appropriations bills out of the House in the entire year. And so now they want to do this all the way to September. They never would have passed appropriations.
I took notes of what the House Speaker, Mike Johnson, was saying, and he said this continuing resolution that's going to come up for a vote later today, which you will oppose, contains, he says, no cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, or Social Security.
Yeah, so it is interesting that obviously we passed the budget resolution, or they passed the budget resolution that is going to require them to go into these cuts, but they've not got their single bills passed. We've got 12 specific kind of categories. And so for everybody at home, when you think about it, when you're paying your bills, you've got your electricity, you've got your house note, you've got that. So that's what we do. We have 12 separate bills, and they've not been able to pass those 12 individual bills. And in those, that is where they are prescribing for the cuts to those specific programs. Now in this, they are prescribing other cuts, such as they want to get rid of money that was in the Inflation Reduction Act, and they want to take back monies, obviously, for our veterans and things like that. So I don't know if they ever plan to actually go through the 12 single appropriations bills going forward. I mean, when you're passing a continuing resolution for the entire fiscal year, I don't know why they won't try to keep doing this. I don't know what they're doing.
MAGA really only has bad options at this point, and it's because they only present bad options. And we have to message all the time, no matter way this goes. And I am glad that I'm no longer hearing from reporters asking questions. Well, do you think Democrats have a responsibility to make sure the government doesn't shut down? No, we're not in charge. It's not our responsibility to make sure MAGA doesn't destroy the country. Now, we are going to make sure people's lives aren't affected, but the blame will not be put on us. Absolutely not. We're tired of that hypocrisy. Speaking of which, there's more than just the budget that Jasmine Crockett was calling out MAGA for. And we can take a look at that in a clip right here.
Let me ask each of the mayors, just yes or no. Have any of you been made aware of any immigrant that has had 34 felony convictions that has still been able to roam around in your cities? Anyone?
No, ma'am.
34 felony convictions.
No, Congresswoman.
From the immigrants. Anybody?
I'm not aware.
Oh, okay. I'm just curious because we are so concerned about crime, and I know that my Republican colleagues would never want anybody with 34 felony convictions roaming around because that could be a danger to the community, but I will move on. The Republicans put more effort into producing their little propaganda trailer for this hearing than they have into reforming America's immigration system. And that's why we're here today. In fact, Republicans are beating up on the vast majority of you about what you're doing for your citizens, but the last time I checked, you're actually showing up. You may or may not be aware, but the NRCC just instructed Republicans to stop their town hall meetings because their constituents were showing up and telling them to do your jobs. If I had to sum up some of what you have said thus far today, I would sum it up as you have been trying to tell them as politely as you can to do their jobs. In fact, we know that they have not done their jobs, and so they're trying to force you to do it for them by turning your local law enforcement officers into ICE agents. They have this fake outrage about how immigrants are stealing resources and jobs from Americans when residents of Boston, Chicago, New York City, and Denver are subsidizing public services in their districts and their states because the Republicans refuse to ensure that their constituents earn a livable wage. Look, They don't have a plan to fix immigration in America because they don't want to. Mass deportation isn't a plan. Arresting kids in schools or worshipers in church isn't a plan. But there are important points to discuss as it relates to immigration in America. So, Mr. Beer, in January, you testified before the Judiciary Subcommittee on Immigration, Integrity, Security, and Enforcement. During that hearing, we played a little game called Rhetoric or Reality. Do you remember that?
I remember, yeah.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead for round 2. Why don't we? Rhetoric or reality? Immigrants are a burden to the American taxpayers because they deplete our federal resources.
That would be rhetoric.
Correct. In fact, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that immigrants will lower U.S. deficits by a cumulative $1 trillion and increase the U.S. economy's size by nearly $9 trillion over 10 years. Is that correct?
That is correct.
In 2023, 47 million immigrants paid nearly $652 billion in taxes, $58.1 billion in taxes alone into Texas. Rhetoric or reality? During his first administration, Trump improved enforcement of U.S. immigration laws.
He did not.
In fact, President Trump closed almost all immigration courts for removal proceedings, cut prosecutions for unauthorized entry by 87%, cut ICE removals to the lowest level in the history of the agency, and released 9,000 people with violent crime convictions back into our communities. Is that correct?
That's right, yes.
So, rhetoric or reality? President Trump's immigration policies make American communities safer.
No, they don't make communities safer.
In fact, nearly 100,000 unauthorized immigrants have obtained legal status through their cooperation with law enforcement. And local law enforcement agencies have more than 300,000 pending requests for immigrants seeking legal status based upon their cooperation with law enforcement, according to the Department of Homeland Security. Is that correct?
That's right. Immigrants work with law enforcement to stop and solve crimes.
Thank you. That was one of my rhetoric or reality questions. Sorry. The question was immigrants without legal status can help stop crime. That's correct.
Yes,
right?
that's
All
correct.
right. And Mr. Beer, isn't it true that Republicans are threatening to illegally strip cities of law enforcement grants intended for local policing and public safety if they don't go along with Trump's immigration agenda?
That's right. They want to redistribute the fiscal burden onto the Democratic cities and away from the Republican ones.
Which brings me to my next point. Mayor Adams, do you believe that President Trump is weaponizing the Department of Justice against local governments like New York City?
I always say it, but is there really anyone better? Let's be real. Is there anyone better than Jasmine Crockett? I don't think so. Just the absolute best in delivering this message and pointing out the hypocrisy, doing it so unapologetically. It's why we're always playing her clips on this show. And if you want to stick around for those, as always, you can hit that subscribe button and leave a like on this video. And if you stuck around to the end, you can drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.